Okay, so let's get started. Today's webinar is going to talk about financial aid for foster youth, and we do have a guest presenter with us today. For those of you who aren't familiar with MEFA, we're a nonprofit quasi-state authority. We've been around since 1982, and we do lots of great work in the community. You can see right here our website has lots of tools and resources, as well as webinars that are recorded online for families and counselors. You will receive 1 PDP point for this webinar. So if you need a certificate of attendance, feel free to email me after the webinar and let me know, and we can send that to you. And we're going to get started. So I'm going to introduce Kristin Quinlan and let her just give a brief overview. You can see her bio right here. She can tell you a little bit about herself and DCF.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today and taking part of this. My name is Kristin Quinlan, and I've been with the department for about 18 years. I currently work with post-secondary youth and have a pretty extensive background in academic and financial planning, as well as life skills training for youth who are in transition, typically from the ages of 18 to 22. However, at DCF, we also like to say think college early. So we do work with those who are in high school and even as much as 8th grade as well. I have a staff of 2 people that help me. They're called education and training workers, and they often go out to schools and post-secondary education. We also have outreach workers who work at each area office, and they are available to guidance counselors and high schools to help students who are in foster care that are currently at your school. So just to get started, just to give a little bit of background, who are our DCF involved students? These guys are from every culture, every race. They typically have many different financial and educational needs. We oftentimes see our youth move frequently, as I'm sure you have seen them at the most have attended at least 2, maybe 3 high schools, and they're also a lot more unaccompanied. As school counselors and social workers, it's really our job to get to know these students, to learn about their interests and goals. Oftentimes, you are the first contact for these guys, and it's really important that we work collaboratively to get the information to them. This information that you learn today will encourage them. Any educational goals relating to higher ed is possible. A history of foster care should not be a barrier for our youth. With your help and encouragement, they can set and achieve their goals. Real quick, I just wanted to point out here, this was a survey that was done in 2011 for Massachusetts foster youth regarding supports that they accessed. And as you can see here, in purple, when applying to school, the foster youth identified their guidance counselors, you, and or DCF workers as being the ones who help them the most in applying to school. And then if you take a look at the orange, that's once they were in post-secondary, they found that their social worker and friends were the ones who helped them stay and maintain their education. This is really important, we feel, with the networking once they're in post-secondary education. Connecting them to the resources that are on campus is going to make them to be more successful and retain their education.
For those of you who are just joining us, again, this is Stephanie at MEFA. Just want to let you know that we do have everybody on mute. So if you have any questions, feel free to send those through the chat feature and we'll answer those as we go.
At DCF, we have a few things that we try to support our young people with as they are going through high school. Between the social workers and outreach workers, we will try to identify transitional support for them. One of the tools that we use is the Young Adult Readiness Assessment tool. And this is really helpful to capture and identify educational and career planning for our kiddos, as well as identifying the adults and the lifelong connections they have who are going to help them access and reach these goals. We also try to make sure that their high school transition plan for youth on IEPs, that those are up to date through their senior year, to make sure that when they're going to post-secondary education, that they can access the support services that they need while at school. At DCF, like I mentioned earlier, we do like to say we'd like to think college early. We do a few different things across the state that are really helpful. We have a college fair, typically during April vacation. This April, we are looking, don't have an exact date yet, but I will have it on our website once we do. And last year we had about 160 students come to our college fair, and we had 33 different schools, both Massachusetts public institutions, 2 and 4 year, as well as MEFA, who came to talk to some of our students. We also try to get some vocational training schools there as well. This is typically held in Westboro, and we will have more information on that as the date comes closer. We also have DCF educational open houses, and these are at DCF area offices, and we welcome foster parents, students, any of the providers for youth that are in group care or residential care. We ask that they come there. Here they can get information about the different programs I'll talk about today, as well as help filling out a FAFSA, information on post-secondary education, the applications, and the process for financial aid. We provide education and training support to our staff as well as our providers in the community. We provide trainings for them multiple times throughout the year, very similar to what's being presented today with a little bit more detail. We do on-campus college advising days. These are things that we go on campus and I meet with financial aid staff, student support services, the bursar's office, and we develop relationships with different admissions counselors and housing. And when we go to campus, we want to make sure that, one, the student is receiving the right amount of financial aid, that their bill is accurate and up to date, that they are accessing the supports that they need on campus, whether that be housing or mental health services, or just connecting to different clubs and organizations on campus. We do that typically for about an hour and a half, and then we provide an opportunity for students to meet with us directly on campus. And we usually are on campus for about 2 hours and have students come to us with their bills, with their award letters, and we go over academic and financial planning with them on campus. Here's an example of one of the things that we do. Right now, the department is working very closely with the Massachusetts public institutions, and we're coming up with different resource lists for students. Due to confidentiality, I can't give them the names of my students, but I can get information out to my students from the school. So this is an example of Salem State and what they provide to me for each semester. It has information on here for my contact information, as well as someone that they can speak to at Res Life or Disability Services. And these people are identified specifically so they don't have to give their backstory. They don't have to go in and say, hi, I'm a foster youth and I need help. They can say they work with Kristin Quinlan at DCF, or, Chris Sullivan from Student Advocacy sent me here and told me you could help me, which makes it a little bit more personal for them. And does not have to create the stress of the trauma that they may have experienced in the past with identifying as a foster youth. So here's the FAFSA. I think we're all a little familiar with what the FAFSA is and how it is completed. There's a few differences that I just wanted to talk about specifically for youth in foster care. The first one is all foster youth must complete the FAFSA. In order to be eligible for any of our other programs, they must have completed and submitted a FAFSA and be eligible for financial aid. Deadlines are even more important for foster youth. I think that this is a key that can be, it means thousands of dollars that can be missed if a foster youth does not apply on time. One of the things we're doing is educating foster youth to take a look at what their school's deadlines are for the FAFSA, as well as if they go out of state, what those state deadlines are for the FAFSA as well. To take advantage of existing resources, we have the lots of different programs I spoke about earlier. MEFA, we also access and direct a lot of our students to MEFA for some more intense planning, if you would. and we get information out to our students on FAFSA Day in Massachusetts. Here's where I think a lot of our questions come, and I wanted to take a little bit more time to talk about the 3 different places our students can check off for foster care. The first one is I was in foster care since turning age 13. This one specifically is for any youth who was in foster care after their 13th birthday. This could have been a youth who went back home as well. They may have been in care from 13 to 16 and then returned home. They could still check off this box that they were in foster care since turning 13. The other one is I am currently or I was in a legal guardianship. This one is more specific to those who may have established guardianship through the department at any point in their life. And they had turned 18 in that guardianship placement. This also can be checked off for youth who may have had a guardianship through probate court and was not DCF involved. They could also check this off. But for the ones we're talking about today, specifically in foster care, this would be a DCF-sponsored guardianship. The last one that we could check off was I was a dependent or ward of the court since turning age 13. And this one's a little bit different from the first one I said, because a ward of the court means they turned 18 in our care and custody. And they did not return home. So if a youth turned 18 in our care and custody through the age of 18 and they were placed in foster care after 13, they would check this off, which is different than the first one if they returned home. I think sometimes I see a lot of confusion from youth who were in foster care prior to the age of 13, and they're checking it off. And we are unable to provide the right documentation to support that. This is just another piece where if they answered yes at any time, they just a little bit more information. They had no live-in parent, even if they are now adopted. And this is very specific to those as well on that first box. If a youth was adopted at the age of 16 or 17, they were still in foster care from 13 to 15. And they can check that box off so they no longer have to report their adopted parents' financials. This was done a little more recently, and to make sure that those who adopted an older youth and had not planned for their education would be able to still be an independent student. If they were adopted prior to the age of 13, they cannot check that box off, and they would need to include their adopted parents' financials. Something new on the FAFSA this last couple of years is also, there's a question that asks if they were a foster youth at any time. By checking off yes, they're going to be given information on the state ETV coordinator, and that would direct the student to contact myself or my program director, letting them know that they may be eligible for what we call ETV. I will talk about ETV a little bit later on in this webinar, but this is very difficult sometimes for those who may have been in foster care and returned home. They would not be eligible for it. So we oftentimes get phone calls from youth who have answered this question and are not eligible for some of the programs that DCF offers. So there's different types of custody that I think would be really helpful for you to understand as we move forward. The first one is permanent custody or care and protection. This is specific to those who have been in our custody and placement because of abuse and or neglect. This is when the parents have been taken to court because they were unable to care or there was a safety concern on their parents, and we take custody of them through a care and protection. The CHINS, which is old, is now called a CRA. It's a child requiring assistance. And this is different where oftentimes the parents will retain We will have physical custody, but the parents will retain the rights for signing all their educational paperwork. Once they're placed with us through a child requiring assistance, it's typically because the child is truant, oppositional behavior, a runaway, and it is not necessarily because of the safety of the child by the parents, rather that the child's behavior is impacting their ability to sustain themselves in the community. Adoption is another one, and again, I have that before and after 13 because they are very different. A youth who was adopted before the age of 13 is not eligible for independent status, but a youth who is adopted after the age of 13 would be. Guardianship placement is another type of custody that we have, and this is when permanency has been established through a guardianship petition. However, parental rights have not been terminated. The youth typically is in a guardianship placement through the age of 18 and can continue until the age of 22 with the department. The guardian would receive a subsidy payment through the age of 22 as long as the youth is attending school. Once a child turns 18, we can no longer have legal custody of them. But the department does offer every youth in placement the opportunity to sign on through their 22nd birthday, and that's called a voluntary placement agreement. So any youth who at the age of 18 is in custody and placement of the Department of Children and Families has the right to extend their services until the age of 22. So oftentimes we will see a youth who may have been in permanent custody or CRA then sign a voluntary placement agreement and remain open with the department until the age of 22. Other types of possible independence that you may work with are those, like I mentioned, through probate court, if a guardianship was through probate. If a youth was homeless. If a youth was homeless and they do have a history of foster care, documentation for foster care is a lot easier to prove than having to resubmit documentation of homelessness every year. So I do encourage you to give us a call if you have a youth that you believe was in foster care so we can help provide documentation for that. We can assist with many different things. We can absolutely assist with some of the financial planning and reviewing of award letters and bills. We can also assist with talking to you about what a student may or may not be eligible for while you're applying to different institutions and getting those award letters back. We can also provide proof of custody. So during the verification process, oftentimes they'll ask for proof of foster care or a ward of the court letter. That is something that DCF can provide. What we would do is we would take a look at the date of birth of the youth as well as the dates of custody and put a letter together to send to the student. We can't send those directly to the school, but we can send them to the student and they can use those for different schools that they're applying to. That's different than a ward of the court letter, and most post-secondary institutions at this point have become very specific in what they're looking for. A ward of the court letter needs to say that they were in our care and custody through the age of 18 and did not return home. And oftentimes they'll ask for when that date occurred. The other thing we can do is a guardianship proof from us. We can provide guardianship paperwork from DCF that says that they were in a DCF supported guardianship placement. If we have documentation of probate courts, we can also provide that. It's not often that we do because these are typically independent from the department, but we should be able to at least direct the youth into what court to go to. This will lead me into the DCF financial supports that we have. These financial supports are, they require different eligibility and are very specific to a youth's custody status as well as age and where they're going to be going to school. So the first one is the foster child tuition and fee waiver. And this tuition and fee waiver is for DCF. I have here in protective custody until the age of 18, but it's also for our CRA youth as well. So it's any youth who is in our custody through the age of 18, whether it's protective or CRA, or if they were guardianshipped, or if they were adopted. These youth have to be unable to return home, and they're able to use these tuition and fee waivers until the age of 25. An application for this should be done right around their 18th birthday. They can submit an application that's available on our website or is available through their social worker and or outreach worker in the area office. We will require a birth certificate and proof of residency as well, as most, if their youth does not have a legal status here and is not eligible for the FAFSA, they would not be eligible for the tuition and fee waiver. This is sent to my office. As a result, we will check eligibility, make sure that they meet the criteria, and we will send the tuition and fee waiver to the youth. And it is the youth's responsibility to bring that to the institution that they're attending. If they do not bring it to the school has no idea that they qualify for it. This waiver also waives the cost of tuition and of state-supported classes only and fees. The good thing about our tuition and fee waiver is the fees that are waived. A lot of the tuition waivers only waive the tuition portion and not the fees, but the DCF waiver does waive the fees. And I think oftentimes students who might get the Abigail Adams scholarship or a need-based tuition waiver, they can't use both, they can only use one. So if they're eligible for ours, they should be using ours. This does not cover books or fees, or I'm sorry, when I say fees, I have to be application fees specifically. Oftentimes I will get calls from people asking about using this during their application process to waive the fees for admissions costs and or deposits, and this does not waive those fees.
And if anybody has any questions as we go, feel free to send those in.
Did I answer the question on the fees for you?
Yeah, we had a question about the fees, but I think we got it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And as always, you can always reach out to me if you are working with a student specifically, and I can go over in more detail. We take phone calls all the time and enjoy knowing who our students are as well. The next one is the Massachusetts Foster Child Grant. This is for youth who are in that protective custody only through a care and protection. This is not for youth who have been guardianshipped, had a CRA, or adopted. It is specific to protective custody only. This is for youth who are going full-time. It can be used in-state and out-of-state, which is very different from the tuition and fee waiver. This one, I have students who are accessing it in Arizona, Florida, Rhode Island, California, Alabama, and also students here in Massachusetts who are accessing it at the public institutions as well. This is also for youth who have not reached their 25th birthday, so they can use it up until their 25th birthday. The one part about this is there is a deadline on here for the Massachusetts Foster Child Grant, and it is July 1st of the academic year in which they'll be attending. So for students who are planning attending in 2019, the new application will come out the end of April, beginning of May, and it will be due by July 1, 2019. This is one of those deadlines I was speaking to on. It's important. The Foster Child Grant Program is $6,000 per year, up to based on need. So it, on average, is $3,000 each semester for a youth, and can really be helpful to those who are attending a private institution and or out-of-state schools. So it's really important that they apply for this on time. I have students often who will submit it now, and I can't go back and pay those. They will go on a late list, but I cannot guarantee payment for those students. The other thing with this would be that they need to maintain satisfactory academic progress, as with the tuition and fee waiver and any other additional program. They must maintain satisfactory academic progress. This leads me to the Education and Training Voucher. This is the program that here at DCF we manage. The other two programs we certify eligibility for, but those are paid for by the Department of Higher Ed directly to the institution. The Education and Training Voucher program comes back to that money I was talking about earlier, the federal government through Chafee. There's been some changes to it this year. This year, youth who are in DCF custody until the age of 18, so it can be any custody status, whether it was protective and or CRA. If they were guardianed by kin after the age of 16, or if they were adopted after the age of 16, they are eligible. The new guidelines say that they are eligible until their 26th birthday. This is very different and new to us since this past summer. It used to be they were only eligible until 23, but they have changed the guidelines for this, which is great because we can award many more students, especially if they chose to take a gap year or if they didn't graduate from high school until they were 21 or 22, they would miss out on this opportunity where now we can fund those guys. There's a maximum of 5 years that they can access this, and the funds for this can be up to $5,000 per year. And this would first and foremost go towards any cash balance the student has. It would then go towards any loan balance that the student has. And then we can use this specifically for books, supplies, transportation, and this would go towards that housing as well when they do get that.
Okay, so we have a quick question.
So the question is, are they able to get the foster child grant and tuition and fee waiver, both of them? Yes, they can. If they qualify and meet the eligibility requirements for both of those, they absolutely can and use those programs as well as ETV. So I have students who go to UMass Amherst, Bridgewater State, multiple Massachusetts public schools, and they're able to use the tuition and fee waiver, the foster child grant, and they're able to access ETV. So most of the time, those students will not have any loans when they graduate their 4-year school. Very rarely should they need loans if they were attending a Massachusetts public school and eligible for all three. One of the things I will say is, given that situation, if someone is getting a full Pell Grant and they're getting the Mass Grant, and then they're getting the tuition and fee waiver and foster child grant, we can't exceed the cost of attendance either, just like the institution cannot. So oftentimes their ETV money would be used for maybe books and supplies only, or transportation costs, or we can pay for a summer course if necessary, or if they were living off campus, some housing. So we take the same calculation into account that the financial aid office does at the institution. The other great thing about ETV is that it can be used for vocational training as well. And if they're taking a certificate program at this community college and they're eligible for financial aid, we can help support them through that as well. So a couple other things I just wanted to do is, what can you do? I think here it's important to identify the foster youth's educational support. I think it's helpful for us to know who you're working with the child. Is it a foster parent? Is it a grandparent? Is it someone in your school that is helping them specifically? It's very good for the department to know who these people are if we haven't already identified them, to make sure that that transition period from when they're graduating your school and starting up at post-secondary, that gap doesn't lose any of our support that they have. Help foster youth review and compare award letters. Again, I think it's really important for foster youth to take a look at the larger picture, not just year to year, and make sure that the return on investment is really important as well. Our guys don't always have someone to help them pay those loans off, so we oftentimes will try to help them make a best financial decision. So maybe transferring from a 2-year to a 4-year school, or comparing award letters from private institutions to state institutions, knowing what they're eligible for through the department. And we would welcome you to give us a call and talk these out with us, either through their outreach worker in their local area office and or through ETV workers. Making sure that foster youth understand the differences between grants, loans, scholarships, and work study. I think it is a challenge for us sometimes to help them understand that a loan is something they need to pay back. It's not free money that they get, and we need to make sure we are doing a better job explaining that to them. Financial planning for short and long-term goals is another big, like I had mentioned earlier, the return on investment. Most often I find a lot of our kiddos want to go to school for social work, which is great. We need some of those out there, but we also want to make sure that they're going to the right school for that and making sure that their return on investment is going to be good. The other thing is to reach out to DCF for existing supports that can help students at your schools. We have, as I mentioned, outreach workers specific to every area office. And oftentimes when a social worker may not be able to answer the question around academic and financial post-secondary planning, the outreach worker is the expert. We are filling out applications with them. We are filling out FAFSAs with them. We are going over the different award letters that they have and the different schools for which they want to attend. So it's really important, if you know who the outreach worker is in the area office from where the student is at, to connect with them as well. Couple other things I just wanted to touch base to would be that we have a graduation every year for Massachusetts graduates in foster care. We would love to know who's graduating from your class. If you have someone who is graduating with their GED, their high school diploma, or if you know someone who has maintained contact with you and is graduating college and was a foster youth, keeping information to them is really important. And we want to make sure that they're invited to celebrate in their area with their graduation dinner. We also want to make sure that we are providing them the information that they need. And our website is www.mass.gov/DCF. On here, you can find all the applications as well as additional support services the department has to offer. We have 3 people who work at central office that can be helpful to you. One is me. Dwayne Smoot is another one who is able to help in the post-secondary planning, and Lori Hernandez. All of their contact information is here and provided to you. I think that's it.
Yeah, so we're going to open it up for questions. We'll leave the webinar open for another minute or two so everybody can submit their questions. Okay, we have a question.
Hi, Anne. So the question was, can we contact these names even though they are not in our area with questions? You absolutely can. Dwayne and Lori are our subject matter experts, if you would, when it comes to post-secondary planning. And typically when they talk to an outreach worker, it's going to get filtered back to one of these 2 anyway. And it would be really helpful for them to be able to know who these students are as they start their post-secondary process, because they will be filling out ETV applications with these guys through the next 4 years of their education. So getting to know them a little bit earlier is always helpful.
Great, thank you.
I would also like to mention too, as I know that you work with a lot of youth who are in high school, and if a lot of them are seniors, the department has what we call the Life Skills Program, and the Life Skills Program can help pay for senior expenses for youth, as well as college pre-enrollment expenses as well. So I just want to put that out there to people who may have those students who have a yearbook or class dues and are with the department and are unable to fund those. There is an avenue for them to access additional funds through DCF, and I think it often can be helpful when trying to get through that last year of high school. So we also have a question, the graduation dinner. Does each county offer that to the graduates, or would our graduates from Berkshire have to travel to a lodge area such as Springfield, etc.? So each region does have, to my knowledge at this point, we're planning this year, each region does have a graduation dinner. So the Berkshire County, it could be in Springfield. I'm not sure. Every year it differs, but that is something we could get information. Justin Lack is the supervisor in the West, and he would have the most up-to-date information on that. We are just in the planning process and starting the planning process for our graduation dinners. So there's one in the South and there's one in the Central region as well. There's also one that we do in Boston through the area office, but our largest event that we do is through Jordan's Furniture in Reading. Sorry, that one is the largest one that we have, and we actually last year I believe had about 250 students come to that with their family and friends. Jordan's hosts it with Fuddruckers as well as Richardson's Ice Cream, and the students get ice cream and food. They're invited into the theater after to receive a gift and watch a movie. The West, because it is far to travel, we do provide buses for students to come out to that if we have enough people coming from the West.
That's great. All right, more questions coming in. And we will get a copy of this webinar to everybody who has registered for the webinar, as well, including the attendees. So we'll send that recording out to everybody, probably either this afternoon or tomorrow. If anybody else has any other questions, we'll leave it open for another minute. We don't have any right now, but feel free to type those in. Okay, everybody, we're not seeing any more questions coming in, so we're going to end the webinar, but feel free to get in touch with any of us, as well as myself here, Stephanie Wells at MEFA, and we are happy to connect you with anybody at DCF. If you lose the slide or can't get in touch, we'll definitely connect you if needed. But we want to thank Kristin for coming today. She comes every couple of years to update us on these important issues, as well as attending some of our guidance counselor trainings every year or two. So we definitely rely on her expertise to help us help these students. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and we'll be in touch with the recording. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.